Hey guys, I wanted to open up a little bit today about my son Emerson and his diagnosis. Some of you might already know this, but he has been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. He's a sensory seeking little boy, and that fits him to a T. Sensory processing disorder is said to affect anywhere between 5 to 16% of school-age children, and it's something that you will carry with you into your adult years. You can kind of learn to adapt and overcome it, but it never truly goes away. Sensory processing disorder is essentially you're unable to process your senses, and there's a lot of senses. It's more than just, taste, touch, smell. It's everything around you. And I think the best way to explain it would be like your brain is receiving all of this sensory input and it's like a traffic jam and it can't make sense of anything. So it just freaks out. It goes into fight or flight. You either see children get really aggressive or really anxious, or they just freak out. And I mean, that is something that we had to see with Emerson, but I kind of want to go over a little bit more about what I saw, what I first saw, what I didn't see but was clearly in front of me, and just kind of give you a little bit more information about SPD. Before I do that, just a quick note, I'm not a mental health professional. I am just a mom of a child with SPD, and I am neuroatypical myself, and my boyfriend is neuroatypical, and that's completely cool with us. I have a psychology degree, so I know a little bit, but I'm not claiming to be a professional. Any decision you make with your child regarding their diagnosis or potential diagnosis has to be done with a doctor. Please. Thank you. Sensory processing disorder was formerly referred to as sensory integration disorder, and I think it was 1963 when an occupational therapist named Anna Jean Ayres coined the term sensory integration dysfunction, and that's really where sensory processing disorder started. From there, it's been expanded upon and elaborated, and now we have what it is today. However, it's not an actual diagnosis. It's not recognized by the DSM or the ICD-10, DSM-5, the fancy books. It is something that exists. It's something that can be tested and measured and observed. It's just not an actual diagnosis, which is kind of similar to like psychopathy or, the psychopath test. It is something that you can be tested for, it can be measured, it exists on a spectrum just like SPD, but it is not something that you can be diagnosed. You're not a diagnosed psychopath. You just have psychopathic tendencies. SPD is often associated with autism, ASD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, but in 2013, a study recognized it as a standalone thing. They found the biological basis for it. I think it was white matter tracts were discovered in the back of the brain, whereas in children with autism or ADHD, the white matter tracts were in the front of the brain. So it's cool that they found the biological basis for it, but there's a lot that they don't know about it. They don't know the genetic factors, they don't know risk factors, they don't know what's heritable, what's not. There's a lot of unknown things about it. And part of the unknown is why it's not in the DSM. It's not clearly defined. There's a lot of overlap between SPD and other disorders. They can't quite tell where one starts and one stops, and it's not, it's just not clear enough for them. And I guess I get that. It's hard to understand that my child has a diagnosis that isn't a diagnosis, but I don't put too much thought into it. There are other correlations, between premature delivery, like a low birth weight, or even prenatal opioid exposure and sensory processing disorder, but that's honestly something that I would personally have to do more research upon before I could speak about it. I don't think that's what caused it with Emerson, but Emerson was exposed to Suboxone while I was pregnant, under doctor's care, but it is possible. As I go on to it and describe more about myself and Greg, my sister, I think that this sensory processing disorder has been in my family for quite some time. And I also think that we were all diagnosed with ADHD when sensory processing disorder probably played a very big role for each of us. Sensory processing disorder looks different for everyone. And I mean, they say that about most diagnoses, but it's a little hard to explain. So there are 3 primary patterns for sensory processing disorder, and then each of them are broken down into different subsets. I'm going to read my notes here because I don't want to mess this up, and like I said, I'm not a medical professional. So the first primary pattern is sensory modulation disorder, and that is broken down into sensory over-responsivity, sensory under-responsivity, and sensory craving or sensory seeking, which Emerson is the third one. The second primary pattern is sensory-based motor disorder, and this is broken down into 2 subsets, which is dyspraxia and postural disorder. And the third primary pattern is sensory discrimination disorders. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. It's broken down into 8 subsets. So the first is visual. The second is audio, auditory. The second is tactile, which is touch. The fourth, I can count, goodness. The fourth is vestibular, which is movement. The fifth is proprioceptive, which is your muscles and joints. The sixth is gustatory, I can barely read my notes, and that is taste. The seventh is olfactory, which is smell, and the eighth is interoception, which is your internal organs. And Emerson is affected by all of these. And you're typically hypersensitive or hyposensitive, which means hypersensitive, you are too much stimulation, or hyposensitive, you're not getting enough stimulation. So the interesting thing about sensory processing disorder is you can be hypersensitive and hyposensitive to the same thing, just different stimuli, or you can be hypersensitive to auditory and hyposensitive to proprioceptive, which is like a big one for Emerson. So I will go over more examples as I go on, but it's just interesting, and I genuinely feel like maybe more children are affected by this than we realize. It explains a lot, especially for me, my sister, and my family. I always expected Emerson to be neuroatypical. Like I said, I am, my sister is, my dad is, my boyfriend is. We have ASD, ASPD, ADHD, depression. We got it all in here. Substance use disorder, almost forgot that one. I never expected him to be normal, and that's okay. He's always had his quirks, but nothing really stood out until I noticed that he had a speech delay. And I mean, this was pretty late, I felt like. He was about 2 or 3 when I went to the doctor, and the doctor said something. So he had aphasia, which is a difficulty conveying spoken language. There's a variety of reasons for a speech delay, which is common in sensory processing disorder. One example could be an inability to hear auditory stimuli, or they could have a hypersensitivity to sound, or hyposensitivity. They might not be able to hear it at all. They might be unable to discern auditory info, like recognizing differences between voices or tones of voices. And, not being able to hear or recognize voices means they're not able to focus, so they're just not able to build their repertoire of language up fast enough because they haven't been able to focus on it long enough. Another possibility is a difficulty with oral stimulation. They could have weak mouth muscles, and they might not have the ability to build up the dexterity in them to actually use the tongue properly. And this affects things like chewing and talking and choking, and even the inability to latch on as a newborn. All of that was part of Emerson's deal, and I didn't realize it. He always had this cute little baby voice, and I loved it so much, but it was actually because he didn't truly know how to use his tongue. And it affected how he ate, it affected how he talked, and for a while he had aphasia where he was truly just communicating via grunts. And I'll try to include a clip of him if I can. Where is he? Who are you looking for? What is it?
Flip it over.
Turn it over. Look at it.
What is it, Emerson? There you go.
But he knew what I was saying, so I wasn't really that worried about it because I knew he was comprehending what we were saying, and he was responding in his own little grunts and groans and whatever, and it was cute. And I remember it was a little after he was 3 years old, we took him to the pediatrician for a checkup, and he was talking, and I could understand him clear as day, but the pediatrician could not understand him. And the speech therapist said that the pediatrician kind of exaggerated a little bit, but it was good that she got him in there, because when she scored his speaking abilities, I guess, he didn't pass the score. He didn't pass the test. So he definitely qualified for speech therapy, and while I was there, she immediately had me fill out an evaluation for sensory processing disorder and got him enrolled in occupational therapy pretty quickly. And it was great. I am so happy. I'm so happy that he did it. Really, it's changed a lot for him. And it turns out that his quirks were a lot more complex than we realized. Greg and I have always known that Emerson thrives with autonomy. He likes to think that he's in control. And if he perceives us as being in control and telling him what to do, he will resist. He will throw a huge fit and it won't go over well. But if he perceives the power in the dynamic, if he thinks that he's in control, he's okay to go along with whatever we suggest. We just have to kind of suggest it in a manner that he thinks he thought of it on his own. Which, I mean, that's common for toddlers. So I thought, I don't know, maybe it's not. So it's always been a give and take of perceived power. And around age 2, his ability to adapt to situations and roll with the punches and let mommy and daddy be in control, his ability to do all of that really, really suffered. But you can't reason with a toddler. Trust me, I've tried to reason with my dog and had more success. So I wasn't concerned with his speech delay or his aphasia, which I didn't realize that's what it was, at the time because I knew he could comprehend what I was saying. But out of nowhere, it felt like suddenly I was unable to communicate with my son. Like he was not listening, he was not hearing me, he was not seeing me, it was nothing. And speech therapy helped with the words, but occupational therapy really helped with the meaning to his behaviors. And I can see now that he had sensory processing disorder. There wasn't very much that I truly recognized beforehand, and I didn't know what sensory processing disorder was until I saw the occupational therapist. But behaviors that I thought were quirky or abnormal beforehand were his, speech delay, which was later aphasia, which didn't worry me. I noticed it. I could tell what it was. I knew he would grow out of it because I could tell that he was understanding language. It was just a matter of practicing it, or so I thought. He was also a very, very picky eater. I mean, this kid eats like 3 things: puddings, hot dogs, and cheese, and that's it. Oh, and he drinks coffee milk and water. But he likes his food very simple, processed, soft, pureed. He doesn't like a lot of dimensions in the texture or the flavor or even the temperature. He would prefer his food cold. So I just thought that's kind of him being a kid. He had a tendency to cough or choke while eating, and I couldn't tell if it was something that he was doing accidentally and then liked the attention that he got from it, which is what I thought it was, or if he was actually coughing and choking every time he ate. Side note, he was coughing and choking every time he ate. He always disliked loud noises, and if we went out to a restaurant or anywhere crowded and noisy, he would cover his ears, and I just thought that's kind of what he did. And it was loud. And then he started doing it for like the toilet flushing or the vacuum cleaner or the car horn blowing or the window being down. And it was things that he was able to tolerate before and suddenly he just couldn't tolerate them anymore. He was also hyperactive AF and clumsy as all get out. And I did notice that he would freak out if he got wet, like especially his head or his face. Bath time was a chore, let me tell you. All of that sounds relatively normal, right? I mean, I thought so, but I was wrong. His sensory processing disorder was affecting him in more ways than I was truly aware of, and it was really holding him back in life. It was making socializing difficult, and it would definitely have affected him had he been in school. But my mom watches him. My mom still watches him. I just have to get him in daycare soon, which sucks. I love having him go and spend all the time with Grammy and Pappy. He loves them. And here are some of the normal behaviors that I thought were normal but weren't normal at all, which would include things like transitions. Transitions would be changing from one task to another, one thing to another, and he would have a meltdown, and I mean like complete and utter meltdown, and he could not move forward, and I couldn't figure it out because I'd be like, let's go get ice cream, and that would cause a meltdown because he wasn't ready to transition. He had to have routine, he had to have structure, and when I took that away, unknowingly, it just destroyed his world because he didn't know what would come next, and he would get incredibly overwhelmed. Now, when it comes to transitions, I try to kind of give him a heads up as much as I can in with notice. I can't give him too much notice because then he will be too excited that he can't wait, and then that causes a meltdown. But if I don't give him any notice, that causes a worse meltdown. It's all about that perceived power for him. He has to feel like he's in control of his situation and setting. And then the small selection of foods, that's definitely something that was because of his sensory processing disorder and his inability to have mouth muscle dexterity. I didn't even know. And the coughing and choking, I thought he was playing, and he partially was, but he had to be taught that, when you put food in your mouth, we started with goldfish, and the fish can't swim on their own. You have to move them to the side of your mouth with your tongue. And that's how he did it. So he put goldfish in there and then practiced moving it to the side. It's like when he ate fresh fruit or peaches or something, he would put it in his mouth and suck on it a little bit and then swallow it. And he commented once that they taste so much better when you chew them. It's man, all those things he didn't eat or wouldn't eat, and he couldn't eat things for a very long time. I had still cut up all of his food because he chokes easily. And he won't try a lot of things because of the texture being two-dimensional, or it's got too many flavors, too many textures, colors. If it's too hot, doesn't matter if it cools down, he's not going to eat it. It's bizarre. And yeah, so I just give him everything cold, and yep, that includes the hot dogs. I give him turkey hot dogs. I don't know. Hot dogs make me feel so bad. I feel like such a bad mom feeding my dog. I feel like such a bad mom feeding my son hot dogs all the time. Literally way more than any mother should. But when he won't eat, I would much rather him eat a hot dog, even a cold hot dog, than not eat anything at all. Because he won't eat. He will say no and mean it and stick to it, and then wake up the next day so hungry, and I feel so bad, but I couldn't get him to eat the night before. And with sleeping, he is up until 12:30 every night. He just lays there and rocks and rocks and rocks. I have to literally lay in bed with him, and I hold him in my arms and I rock him in place, and that is how he is able to stop moving and go to sleep. We have to play music. It's an escapade. And I don't know, man. My sister was 4.5 when she was diagnosed with ADHD and put on a very low dose of methylphenidate, which is Ritalin. And I have been worried about that since I've had Emerson, because I know he's neuroatypical, and that's okay with me. My issue isn't that he's neuroatypical. It's trying to make everybody else understand him. Hence the medication, because they can't quite understand the ADHD kid, so they want to medicate them so that they fit in. And I am just not sure how I feel about medicating Emerson yet. And I do feel better knowing that sensory processing disorder is a thing, because my sister had that, and I had that, and Greg had that. Hence why I don't think that this is caused from prenatal opioid exposure. It could be, but it's definitely something that is in my family. And I think it might have benefited my sister to have gone through occupational therapy for this as well. She did lots of therapy. She did play therapy, and she had to see a psychologist all the time, because prescribing medication like that to such a young child is a big decision. And my mom has talked to me recently about it, and she said that she almost felt like she waited too long because she was so concerned with other people's opinions. And I can understand why. People judge you so badly, especially if you are medicating a child for anything. I'm sure people are going to comment on this video about it, and I'm not even medicating Emerson. I'm worried about the idea of having to medicate him one day for school, because he finished speech therapy already, and he's close to finishing occupational therapy, but I have to get him enrolled in preschool. And even the occupational therapist is worried about him starting preschool without medication or some sort of play therapy to go along with preschool, or having an occupational therapist come to his preschool. I don't know. Other things that I didn't notice before was his hypersensitivity to auditory stimuli. He hates going out to the restaurants. He hates being anywhere loud and noisy. We were at the York Fair the other night, and it got too loud, and he started to freak out. It's it triggers fight or flight for him, and he's a fighter. He's not going to fly away. He's not going to freeze. He's going to fight. He gets aggressive. And he has proprioceptive and vestibular hyposensitivity anyway, so he likes to be moving. He likes to be spinning. oh, my leg's asleep. He likes to be running and jumping and hitting, and like he can spin in circles and circles and circles and not get dizzy. It's crazy. He said, go. Whoa!
You want to do a backflip? Ready, Mommy?
Ready.
Yeah.
Whoa! He's a very energetic kid, and I just love him. I love the way that he's always moving. Understanding his sensory processing disorder has really helped me be more accommodating as a mom. I understand him better, and I feel like I'm setting him up for life better, and it makes me happy. You know, he still can't sit still, and he absolutely can't sit still if you want him to listen, which sounds counterintuitive, but you have to kind of make eye contact and just let him bounce, because that's the only way he can truly listen to you. If not, if he's focused on sitting still, he can't hear anything you're saying to him. He hears things, but he doesn't comprehend them. Again, that's why we do the eye contact, because I at least know he's picking up a little bit of it. He still has weak mouth muscles. He lacks the dexterity to fully chew on his own, but he is now able to eat a slice of pizza without me having to cut it up, which is really impressive, and I'm proud of my little guy. Another thing that is kind of odd, I guess, that I didn't notice before was his dislike for getting wet, right? So he hates washing his hair or getting his face washed, but he also likes to play in puddles. Like, he'll wear his rain boots out there and splash around, but the moment he's done playing, or if he's playing with, something sticky like Play-Doh or slime, and the moment he's done and he realizes that he's wet or sticky or messy, he melts down. And I couldn't understand that, because I was like, you did it to yourself, you ran in the puddle. And he would literally be paralyzed with his sensory overwhelm. Like, it's hard to explain. He would suddenly be done playing, want to go inside, literally feel his body, realize how wet he was, and cry and just freeze. So I would have to take off his pants or his socks and his boots and carry him inside, or I'd have to run to the kitchen and get a wet paper towel to wipe his hands off, even though he was just so willingly doing it to play. It's just when he's done playing, he's done, and he does not like the way it feels afterwards. He had a passy for a very long time, but I still catch him chewing on his shirt or his toys or things that he shouldn't be chewing on. He'll chew on straws, he'll chew on his plastic, what are they called? Forks, knives, spoons. His proprioceptive senses are hyposensitive, which means he's constantly trying to move. He is not aware of where he's at in space. Like, he's running into things, he's tripping, he's falling, he's constantly jumping. His vestibular senses are hyposensitive, so he's constantly spinning and running and jumping and climbing, and he's the kid that likes to be flipped upside down, and he just has fun with this. And his tactile and proprioceptive and vestibular, he likes to be tickling and giving bear hugs, and it's cute, but he's not socially aware of how to do that or when to do that with someone else, and he will end up, he doesn't know how to tickle. Like, he can't figure out how to do it with his hands, so he will end up just like poking you in the face, and then you pretend like it tickles. But it's cute because he loves being cuddled, he loves being kissed, he loves all of it, and it's just different. But he still struggles to get dressed. He fights me. He's unable to put his own head and arms and sleeves. He can't really wipe his own butt. He hates brushing his teeth, and it's a battle just to have us brush his teeth. He's getting better about washing his hair, because he takes baths all the time, but there are a lot of things that are still struggles. He hates tags. He hates the way the seams on his socks feel. And I have people, friends, coworkers that tell me oh, this is just normal childhood behavior. My child does the same thing. Blah, 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 my son does this, and I don't think that their intentions are bad. I think that they're trying to come from a place of, oh, your son's normal, my son's normal, it's okay, don't feel bad, this is nothing. But it doesn't come across that way. It makes me, it makes me feel like they doubt my belief in the doctor, they doubt my belief in the occupational therapist. They don't truly listen when I say how extreme it is. He coughs and chokes on all of his food. He will only eat this small range of food items, and they are very simple and not complex. And I don't know. I understand the intention, but I feel like they see sensory processing disorder or just being neuroatypical or neurodivergent as a bad thing, and I don't. I think it's a great thing. I think differently and I act differently, and I'm a little weird, and that's okay. I love my brain, and I love the way that I think, and I still say that, I love it. I love being neuroatypical, but I still treat my disorders. I still have found ways to kind of manage it so that it makes life easier. I'm not looking for a cure. I'm not looking to get rid of it. I am just looking for ways to manage it, to fit in a little bit better. Really, that's really what it's about, is just fitting in with other people, not looking like such a weirdo. I'm not normal, and that's okay, but treatment is just a way for me to learn about my environment and my disorder and just kind of give me some awareness about any tips or tools or tricks I can use to adjust and adapt. Like I said, understanding the sensory processing disorder in general and how it affects Emerson has really helped me accommodate him and be a better mom, and it's helped him grow and blossom into this amazing, spunky little boy that he is. And I'm so proud of him, and I can't wait to see what he does as he continues to grow. I just want to end this with one thing. Please remember that there's no such thing as a bad kid. And I think that is something that like my generation and younger is kind of really enforcing with parenting, the millennials. You hear that there's bad kids, they're throwing tempers, they're cranky, they're blah, blah, blah. But no, there's tired kids and hungry kids and overwhelmed kids and anxious kids and kids that are struggling with sensory processing issues and kids that don't understand social cues and kids that are, just being kids. There are kids that are grumpy. There are kids that are just learning how to share. It's our job as the adults and as their parents to figure out what's going on with them and fully understand them and help them and accommodate them so that they can live life to its fullest potential, so that they have the possibility of being happy and adjusting and adapting well. Like, no one is normal, and there's no such thing as a bad kid. And I don't know, I hope this was informational. I hope it was a little enlightening about what I go through with Emerson. And I promise I will look into the correlation between sensory processing disorder and opioid exposure, prenatal opioid exposure. I just don't think that that's where it comes from for us because we have such a big family history of it. But I'm not saying that it's not part of the equation. It seems that sensory processing disorder is a very big environmental and genetic thing. We just don't know yet, but we need to put some more money into researching it, so that will be cool. But that's all I have for today, guys. Bye.